Here we go. Click.
The Kansas City Chiefs' pursuit of a three-peat begins tomorrow. Let's talk about it.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Welcome into a live game preview edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our incredible partners in possible here at KCSN. I can't believe we are finally here. I'm so excited. It is a Matter Day here on the Laboratory. Maddie Lane, Maddie Hamilton. I'm Matt Swanson. Maddie Lane, how are we doing?
We're doing great. We talked about it already. College football's going. We got the NFL is kicking off in less than 24 hours from right this moment. The Chiefs will be playing. Like, it's the time. It is the time of the year that we all get excited for. We're all waiting. So I'm just kind of ready. We got one more little sleep, and then it's time, Hamilton.
I really can't believe it's here. It is, going full off-season mode for 7 months, and it's going to be so great to have actual games to cover again. And obviously getting this started off with the Chiefs, there's nothing better than that.
Man, I mean, a lot of salute to you, Hamilton, because, doing a lot of football content during the off season. I mean, we know specifically, but you're doing a daily show. You're out there, like, tons of props to you. I'm sure you're just excited that we get to just start breaking down real football again.
Oh man, it's going to be amazing. I can't wait. The off season has its own charms, but there's nothing like having actual games to react to and not having to, scrounge through Ryan Grubb press conferences in the middle of May to see what's going on with the Seahawks. So this is going to be great.
Hamilton, fun story about Ryan Grubb. So I played at Mid-American Nazarene University, played in the national semifinals my senior year of college, and we got destroyed by Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Very good NAIA program. The offensive coordinator was Ryan Grubb. Hung 50 on us. Kalen DeBoer was the head coach the year before we wound up there. So decent little coaching tree there out there at Sioux Falls. So,
sorry to run. I didn't know I was bringing up picking at old wounds. I'm sorry.
Honestly, we'll talk about Jared Allen later, and it'll be perfect.
Hey, we don't go there. We won't talk about that. But I had Jared Allen's phone number. Accidentally called him a couple days ago. Hung up very quickly. I'll tell you the story off air, Hamilton. We have a game preview to do here. The Chiefs are playing the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday Night Football as another banner gets dropped over the National Football League. The Chiefs are obviously back-to-back Super Bowl champions. They'll be going for a three-peat, and they will be playing a team, the last AFC team that they played in 2023, getting them in a rematch very quickly out the gate here. And this is a game preview episode. We're going to be previewing both sides of the football, giving you everything you need to know about both sides of the Chiefs football, and then players to watch. We'll make some predictions at the end. It's going to be a lot of fun. We always start with the offensive side because, actually, we didn't start with the offensive side entirely last year because the defense just started being so good and the offense struggled. But no, we're back. We're all in. And part of the reason we are back all in is because it looks like we're going to see the vertical passing game back in Kansas City. Xavier Worthy hoping to be a big part of that. I think the Chiefs are going to go out and try to chuck the ball around, try to be aggressive down the field. What say you, Matt Hamilton?
Yeah, I do think they will. I mean, they got all these new toys. I think we're going to see them use them. Xavier Worthy totally changes the way this offense can play, brings the vertical passing game back into it, but it's almost, you don't want to get baited into taking too many shots either, right? Because what's made the Chiefs so successful offensively in the Mahomes era, we see obviously all the Mahomes highlight plays, but they take what the defense is giving them. They get these receivers the ball in space. give them a chance to make plays after the catch. The Chiefs led the league in yak last year, and that was a big part of the success that they did find offensively. So while it is going to be fun and we want to see bombs away for sure, they still got to take advantage of the underneath stuff.
For sure. And like, I think last year, what kind of goes under the radar is that last year was Patrick Mahomes, I think, third highest in terms of the volume, the amount of times he threw deep. They threw the ball deep over 10, around 10%, just a hair over 10% of his pass attempts. That was more than the previous 2 years. Now, the big difference was they only completed them at his career low, 32% completion percentage. They just weren't good at doing it. It felt like they were forcing some shots when they tried to go downfield. Everything that in the latter half of the year had to come off a heavy play action, and they're trying to throw semi-contested passes to Justin Watson and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So they weren't quality deep shots is what they were getting last year. They had to force some in to try to back teams off. And this year, the hope is the speed of Worthy, the speed of Hollywood Brown when he comes back. He's obviously out for this game. But the hope is the threat of those guys not only might equate to better efficiency when they do throw deep, but it's going to clear up space for the other guys. So yeah, I think we're all on the same page here. They're going to go out there. They're going to show you something. They're going to let Xavier Worthy run. They're going to try to wear out some cornerbacks and let him get downfield, and they'll probably throw a couple, and they might have some other designed plays to get Kelsey or Watson on the corner routes because they really like to get those guys working on the corners with the little sail concepts and stuff. So they'll do things to push the ball downfield, but I think this is going to be like the test run to see how our team's going to play Xavier Worthy. Are they going to try to run with 4.2 speed down the sideline like they did last year with not as fast guys? Or are they going to go back to the defense of a couple seasons ago and try to put, the fence over the top of everything and hold everything underneath to really let Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice go to work?
And, I think one thing that we've talked about a lot this offseason and as the very first practice for camp, the Chiefs uncorked one that went a little bit viral, Mahomes to Worthy vertical shot, right? And the Chiefs, obviously, they're going to be very selective about what they want out there and what they don't want out there, what they want in public practices and what they don't want in public practices. I think they wanted to set the tone. I think they've been wanting to set the tone the entirety of this offseason that this is a threat. This is a vertical threat that you're going to have to account for. You better figure out how to handle it. And, oh, by the way, everything underneath is one of the most dynamic in the National Football League, right? Like, I think, they really, the reason they went and got McCole Hardman last year midseason, because they really wanted to try to establish a vertical stretchability back into this offense. And it didn't turn out great last year. But the hope was if we can get a little bit more, if we can take the lid off a little bit, if we can establish something down the field that creates a little bit more space for Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice. And I think I've seen it, even at training camp, you saw how often and how easy it was for Rashee Rice working underneath in the passing game. They were playing a bunch concept with Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice in the bunch, and they ran Hollywood and Xavier vertical. And I mean, Rashee Rice has never been more open on an out route. Like, he's just big chilling out there. And I think one thing that's underrated about Rashee Rice is if you can give him an opportunity to catch the ball on the move, that's a terrifying proposition for defenses, allowing him to run through, right? So if there's, pass concepts that allow him to catch the ball on the run a little bit more, giving him runways is a big problem for teams too. And we got to see that for sure some last year, but I do think that could be something that gets unlocked a little bit more in him because of the vertical stretchability. Think about Juju Smith-Schuster 2 years ago. He got to do that a lot more, angle routes, under routes, catching the ball and getting a run after the catch. That's terrifying if I'm team. So like, I think this is going to be a pick your poison. And I think, you've got to get the vertical passing game established a little bit, at least scare them, at least make them think that you're going to be able to do this. Because if you can, I mean, it's going to be a problem. Hamilton, give me something that you're watching on the Chiefs offense this upcoming game, or against the Ravens defense too, if you want. Like, I mean, by all means, whatever.
Yeah. So one thing everybody has made a big deal about Derrick Henry going to the Ravens, which obviously it is a big deal. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I feel like it's kind of been overlooked how many changes the Ravens have gone through that might not be as great this offseason. Yep. And one of them, you lose your defensive coordinator, who was the best defensive coordinator. I mean, between him and Spags, the two best defensive coordinators in football last year, in Mike McDonald. And, Zach Orr, I think, they have a lot of faith in him. I think he's a really promising, bright young coach, but he's 32 years old. It's his first time calling defensive plays in the NFL, and it's against the Chiefs. And like you mentioned, Kent, or should I say Matt Swanson, it's not just the Chiefs offense, but the Chiefs offense with some unknown elements with Xavier Worthy and how they're going to use him. So that's going to be a lot on Orr. You would expect it to still be the same character of Ravens defense that we've seen in the past, super aggressive, giving you a lot of different looks up front. Obviously, we know that secondary still has a ton of talent. But that's something that's going to be really interesting to me, having a rookie defensive coordinator trying to corral this Chiefs offense.
Well, I think a big thing too, you mentioned it, like they have the change at defensive coordinator. I believe they also lost 3 position coaches as well in the turnover. But then on top of that, I mean, they did lose their best or second best defensive end and Jadeveon Clowney goes off in free agency and goes and signs somewhere else too. And now they have heavily invested in edges throughout the draft recently. That's the Baltimore Ravens. They are always going to. But up until this point, David Ajabo, Adafe Owe, these guys weren't as good as what Clowney was, both as pass rushers, but then also as run defenders. So now you do have new defensive coaching coming in. You now have other guys that have to step up and replace what Clowney was able to do on as many snaps as he played, because he is one of the better run defenders in the entire NFL. He kind of gives them an element of maybe we can play a little bit lighter because we know we're going to get excellent run defense out of this position. I wouldn't say that was Owe's or Ajabo's strength in college going back to Penn State and Michigan. That wasn't what they were known for. So there is definitely a lot of changes on the front, I think, of this Baltimore Ravens defense. So while it will be a difficult challenge for the Chiefs, like offensive line, to still block these guys, I do think that it's going to be equally difficult for them to understand how they need to attack this Chiefs offensive line. You're going to see how they're going to test out Kingsley Suamataia there at left tackle in his first action. Jawan Taylor coming back off of last year where he gets, this penalty-riddled year. How do they want to pressure him if they aren't having the same rotation of edge rushers? I think that's just something to keep an eye on as this game gets going.
I think it's fair to say that. Oh, go Hamilton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it's a great. I thought Clowney had the best year of his career last year there in Baltimore, so that's a huge loss. Also, Patrick Queen, obviously a huge presence in on the second level of that defense, and also Geno Stone, who was an interception machine for them last year.
Mm-hmm.
So they lost pieces on all 3 levels.
Yeah, and I think we probably aren't talking about how unproven that pass rush is enough. I mean, Kyle Van Noy's back. That's and he's more of he's not your best pass rusher, but he's definitely a guy that kind of plays out there on the edge a little bit. And they have a lot of draft picks that haven't performed quite yet to what you're hoping for. They've taken a lot of swings, to Maddie's point, at the edge position, but I think there's probably more unknowns at that edge rusher spot than we're really acknowledging. And I think you guys did a good job of bringing that up on top of everything that this team is dealing with here with new DC and getting some new game names introduced and not having potentially the same kind of pass rush. So are you gonna blitz Mahomes? You're gonna try to trying to heat Mahomes up with a lot of pressures. Like, what are we doing here? How are we trying to navigate that? So do you I don't know, if you're a first time DC, pass rush may not be as strong. I mean, what are you trying to do here? What do you think they're doing here, Hamilton?
It's a great question. And I do think we see them, try to play a similar style to what they did last year. I think, again, it's always been in Baltimore. It's not, obviously you want to have great edge rushers, but they manufacture pressures and they come from everywhere. They usually have 15 different guys record a sack every year. And they show you so many exotic looks up front. So I think we're going to see that again. And they are really good on the back end. Adding Nate Wiggins to that group too, I think was a great get for them. Kyle Hamilton is as good a safety as there is in this league. So they have a lot of that talent on the back end. Obviously the Chiefs are going to stress you and, put you in a lot of tough spots too. But I do think we see some aggressiveness up front and some different looks. Try to confuse the Chiefs up front a little bit.
And so I was talking to some people that cover the Ravens, trying to really get deep into what they do, and they went in on that. Is the secondary they think is going to be the strength of this defense this year. You bring in Nate Wiggins, you get, a completely healthy Marcus Williams all year. You bring in Eddie Jackson to replace Geno Stone. They really like those pieces. And it sounds like, at least in these opinion here, is that they are going to play a little bit more too high stuff, go more split field coverages, and that's going to allow them to rotate guys in and out consistently, but also that's going to allow Kyle Hamilton to maybe step down and play in the slot or in the box slot more because they have Eddie Jackson and Marcus Williams to play deep. So I do think you might see a defense overall that is going to play a little bit more coverage centric. And then they're going to show you all these different pressures. And sometimes they're going to bring it, sometimes they're not. And what they're going to do is really what Steve Spagnuolo does for the Chiefs. They're going to try to manufacture one-on-ones for Justin Madubuike. They're going to try to get Kyle Van Noy maybe getting unpressured rushes off the edge. They're going to get Odafe Owe. They're going to get him one-on-one with the tight end from time to time. Like, they are going to try to manipulate your pass protection and rely on the coverage in their secondary. So it'll be interesting to see how the Chiefs attack it. I wonder if this isn't a game that you see the Chiefs try to come out and do more of their heavy personnel stuff. Andy Reid doesn't love to show a lot of things early on in the season, especially against AFC opponents, but it's week 1. A lot's going to change from here until the end. So maybe coming in with getting Noah Gray out on the field a bunch, you keep the Ravens in base, which keeps Trenton Simpson, on the field, now replacing Patrick Queen. You keep 2 of those edge rushers on the field. You make Kyle Hamilton have to declare as a deep safety or a box defender, and then you just kind of play away from him, for a lack of better term. So I just wonder if this isn't a game where we see a lot of 12 personnel from the Chiefs to dictate what the Ravens can do specifically with Kyle Hamilton.
No, that's not a bad thought at all, honestly. And, even extend a little bit beyond 13. I think with Hollywood Brown's absence, like, there's going to be a lot that changes for this offense anyway. So when you look at if this team has to play the Ravens down the road in the playoffs, they are not going to have the luxury of seeing Hollywood Brown. And so missing out on one of those key offensive players, you might be able to get a little bit away with more in this game and change things up a little bit more, because you're not going to have to have shown too much with what you're going to do with Hollywood Brown to this team as well. So I think that's another little wrinkle that is worth paying attention to as well. Maddie Lane, anything else on offense before we move on?
I'm also a little intrigued to see what the Chiefs run game, just what the Chiefs overall do. We talked about the passing game to start, right? And we think they're going to try to air it out vertically, use that speed to create some space. But what's the Chiefs run game look like? And I talked about it after the first preseason game, and I think the Chiefs kind of backed off of it a little bit, but they came out that first preseason game and they were 50-50 gap stuff and zone stuff. And we know Andy Reid's never going to completely get rid of his zone runs. It works with all the RPOs. It works with all the jet motion stuff. But they have leaned into the more man blocking stuff in the run game a lot. And I think it pairs better with Trey Smith. It pairs better with the Kingsley Suamatae, just these guys that can really move bodies. Why not lean into it a little bit more? So I am interested to see. And then I also think it helps Pacheco. It forces him to run downhill more and not have to rely on his vision as much as you get in the zone run game. And I think that suits his style. So do they come out and try to run it downhill a little bit more, or are they going to continue to sprinkle in so much of the zone game that works? I'm not going to sit here and say a team that's won this much success isn't working, but I think we all like it when the Chiefs run downhill. So I'm intrigued to see if they try that in this game, or if they just kind of rely on what they usually use, which is that, heavy outside zone influence.
Hamilton, you got anything for us?
Maddie, actually, so I don't know if I can move how we're working with the rundown there on the side, if I can move to my offensive players to watch, because Maddie actually
absolutely.
I love it. Hamilton, transition us into this next segment. Let's go.
Well, Maddie talking about the use of 12 personnel, my mind was in the exact same place, because I'm thinking we see more of these tight ends on the field, and doing the breakdown the last couple of years, Matt Castle, Chase Daniel, it seems like we would pick the 3 kind of most impactful plays from each Chiefs game and break them down. And I swear, I feel like every single week there was a 13 personnel play in there. So my offensive player to watch, Jared Wiley. I know there's some unrealistic expectations for the rookie with some of the comparisons he got and everything, but I really do think he's going to be fantastic. I'm really interested to see how they integrate him in. I know there are going to be moments where we see 13 personnel, some of these heavy packages on the field. I'm looking for him to make a big play here at some point in this game.
Maddie, who you got?
Oh, you want me to go next? Okay.
Yeah, always.
I'm going to go with Trey Smith. Right guard for the Chiefs. So I think Trey Smith had his worst year as a pro last year. And so we're going to say he's playing next to a new right tackle. The offense is struggling on its own. I think there's some reasons for it. But then one of the big things that sticks out to me is you go back to the playoffs last year. Trey Smith kind of dominated Christian Wilkins in that wild card round. Like that was probably his best game of the year. Go to the game against the Ravens. I would say it was one of his not as good games of the year. He struggled with Justin Madubuike. He had 2 penalties when blocking him. He gave up a couple pressures. It wasn't his strongest performance. So this kind of ties into what I said. Do they let Trey Smith really get going and let him, block downhill? Because I think that seems to when he's most comfortable is when he's mixing in, getting his hands on defenders, attacking them in the run game, and then he can use that to set up his pass protection. Or is it going to be a game where he's just asked to drop back a bunch and just straight up pass protect? Because that seems to where he struggles the most. So big matchup for him right out the gates. I assume Justin Madubuike will be lined up over him a ton again, like it was in that conference championship game. I just want to see how he handles it. I think he's set for a really good year. I think he's going to bounce back exceptionally well this year, but it's a big matchup of 2 really strong interior guys. And Trey Smith usually rises to the occasion in those moments. Just the last time these 2 teams met, I'd say he definitely came out on the lower end of that, just a pure one-on-one matchup of those 2.
Hamilton, I love the Jared Wiley call. So I'm not sure if the Chiefs have played a little bit coy, or maybe he didn't live entirely up to some of the buzz early on in the offseason. But I just know that I've heard good things about Jared Wiley. So I'm fascinated to see if this is like they've just played a little bit of hide and seek with him during the preseason and are ready to unleash him in the regular season. I'm really curious to see what he looks like, because I've heard some good things, man. I've heard some good things. I'm looking forward to seeing what the reality is there. I'm paying attention to the running backs, just the entirety of the room. I mean, you talked about Pacheco, but I'm curious what Carson Steele and Samaje Perine's role look like in this game. How much Carson Steele gets run, if he's getting a little bit of that RB2 kind of touch count. And Samaje Perine, I think Samaje Perine is going to have a nice play here. I think he's going to have a nice play in the passing game. Little screen action. That's a good play to get place to get him involved. So I'm paying attention to that running room, the rotation, and what those guys look like. We're going to take a break. We'll be back to talk about the defensive side of the football right after this.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Those players to watch are presented by Tickets for Less. Make sure you're using promo code KCSN for any tickets that you might be purchasing over there. Get your best discount available out there at Tickets for Less. All right, let's talk about the defensive side of the football. Matty Lane, we've got the Chiefs. We've got Steve Spagnuolo versus Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. What are you paying attention to?
I mean, I guess it's hard. Hamilton kind of mentioned it earlier. We got to talk about the Derrick Henry aspect here. That's the big addition the Ravens make. The Chiefs had some big matchups with the Titans and Derrick Henry, and it kind of felt like that was the center of a lot of those matchups was, can they slow down Derrick Henry? What can they do against him? You now put Derrick Henry on one of the biggest, rivals and the team that's got Lamar Jackson in the backfield. That seems like a good place to start. So I think we start there. And the interesting part is, how are the Chiefs going to play that backfield, right? With Lamar Jackson, I might not think he's the best thrower of all the quarterbacks in the NFL, but he's clearly good enough, or a very good thrower of the football, that if you're going to give him good looks by loading up the box to stop a Derrick Henry, to stop him running, he's going to make you pay 9 out of 10 times. And it's going to be consistent, right? He's gotten to the point where he's good enough to do that. So you can't sell out to stop Derrick Henry like you could the Titans teams of the past. At the same time, you can't sit back and play soft and let Derrick Henry run downhill, because that's the worst way to stop him, is to let him get ahead of steam. You have to hit him in the backfield near the line of scrimmage. So it really puts a defense in the bind. And historically, the Chiefs have just sent bodies at Derrick Henry, tried to hit him in the backfield. We all remember Dan Sorensen chopping his legs down numerous times in a playoff game, until where Derrick Henry didn't want contact anymore at that point in time of a playoff game. And then you look at how the Chiefs have played the Ravens, and it's been a lot of just like mush rush, contain Lamar Jackson, keep everything in front of it, but they're not really getting upfield. So how do they balance those two ideologies going into this backfield, which has 2 very different player skill sets? I'm not sure which way I'd lean for that, Hamilton.
Yeah, and I'm interested again. Derrick Henry's going to make this offense better, but this is an offensive line that lost 60% of its pieces from a year ago. They kept their 2 best in Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum, but hearing Eric DeCosta the other day say we had to get younger on the offensive line because of the salary cap doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. And, there's some good pieces. Daniel Falalele is a fascinating player with his size and strength. But you got a really green right side of that line with him and Roger Rosengarten, the rookie second-round pick. I'm interested to see how Spags is going to attack that group, and I'm just interested to see how this unit is going to look because, as we know, it doesn't matter what you have in the backfield, what you have at the skill positions. If the offensive line is messy against this incredible Chiefs defense, it's going to be a long game for the Ravens offense.
Well, and some of these guys really haven't had a ton of, there's the chemistry side of just being together, right? But there's also just some of these guys are just not super experienced. I mean, there's some inexperience just on that line in and of itself. So a group that really hasn't played a ton together, a young group that's a lot of unprovens, a lot of unknowns, and okay, there's a lot of chemistry to be tested there. Like there's a lot of challenges just from the mental side, not just whether or not these guys are able to continue the strength of this group, continue to be a strong offensive line. You've got a lot of factors that are playing, and like that's a really good point, Hamilton. It's just like we haven't acknowledged it, like you kind of said, we haven't probably acknowledged it as much as we should heading into this game. Is like that's a big challenge. I like, Daniel Falele was an interesting giant 400-pound man. How does he play in a serious amount of snaps? How is he able to challenge at guard? Yeah, it's like I don't know. Do we know if Roger Rosengarten is starting or is it going to be Patrick McCarry? Do we know yet?
I don't know for sure. Last I heard, they might do the rotation again, like they were doing with Stanley last year. I think I heard that they might do the little bit of the rotation with McCarry and Rosengarten at the right side this year, which, like, I guess it makes sense if you had success with it in the years past, you used it a little bit. But what happens if, Ronnie Stanley still isn't ready to play 100% of the snaps? What happens if he's still struggling a little bit in one regard like he has in the past couple of years after those injuries? So I think the offensive line question is like the biggest part for the Ravens here. It's made a big deal that Derrick Henry last year for the Titans had like the lowest yards, or the lowest amount of yards before contact or something like that in the NFL for running backs with a certain amount of carries. Are we certain that it's going to be significantly better with the Ravens? The Ravens were great at this last year, and like that helps when you have Lamar Jackson. He's clearly going to create some extra space because of his threat with his arm and his legs. But if the offensive line isn't good, or if they're still trying to gel, are we certain that they are going to all of a sudden go back to last year where Gus Edwards is essentially getting 3-4 yards downfield before anybody has a chance to touch him on every single run again? I don't know if that's going to be the case when you're looking at this entirely new offensive line. And that's really where Derrick Henry's at his best, is when he gets that head of steam. So how does that pair? Like, how does that work? Are the Chiefs able to take advantage of that? We don't know yet.
Yeah, and it's a great point. The one place where we've seen Derrick Henry get stopped in the past is if you can get to him before he gets going, because, being the bigger back that he is, sometimes, takes him a little bit to get that head of steam. Yeah. So that's a great point. And yeah, I mean, listen, still with what Linderbaum can do, getting out in space, his athleticism, I still think we'll see them create some space for him at times, but you're right. It's the consistency. It's the snap after snap after snap. Are there going to be miscommunications or chemistry issues, like you said, Ken? That's going to be kind of where my eyes are glued in this game.
It's a good point. And like, I mean, you're right with Lamar Jackson back there. How much can you play upfield? How much can you play in a gap? Like, are you playing a little bit more contained even in the run game? Like that can help supplant that. If you're not having to live, or if you're not trying to play as much upfield, that can kind of help some things out a little bit and give, Derrick Henry and afford, Derrick Henry a little bit more of that runway than you might otherwise get other places. So that's something worth paying attention to. I think one of the things I'm paying attention to is the tight ends. There's multiple tight ends on this team. And like when you're looking at the pass catching group, it's a little underwhelming. Nelson Aguilar is listed as a starter with Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers. And Zay Flowers had a fantastic season last year. Good on him. I think this is a pretty underwhelming receiving group, largely outside of Flowers. But when you look at the two tight ends and Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely getting to play together, we haven't got to see it all that much. Isaiah Likely stepped up and had a really good season as Mark Andrews was missing some time. Now they're both back. That tight end grouping, Hamilton, I think, is a really dangerous pairing.
Yeah, I mean, likely showed he's a number one tight end in this league last year. After Andrews got hurt, he was phenomenal down the stretch for them. He is a matchup nightmare, and we're hearing that there's going to be a lot of 12 personnel out of the Ravens all year long. So that's it's hard to match up against two guys that are that big and that athletic. I'll also say this: you talk about the receiver group. Zay Flowers, we saw have an excellent rookie year. I'm really Rashad Bateman kind of has my attention right now. And I know like he's one of those guys where it's like he hasn't put together yet all the injuries. I feel like everybody's kind of out on him, which is why seeing the Ravens extend him this offseason was one of those things that, really, really caught my attention because it's, he hasn't really done anything yet to earn an extension. And I think that says something about the belief they had in him. And it had me do more digging as this offseason went on. And everybody in that building is kind of all in on Rashad Bateman and what he's been doing this offseason. And I don't know, it seems to be beyond the usual kind of camp hype stuff, offseason hype type stuff. It seems like they really have a belief in him in that building. So I'm interested. He is supposedly finally healthy, coming to the season for the first time, I think, ever. So I'm interested to see kind of what he has out there too. And that's somebody I wouldn't sleep on.
Yeah, I really like Bateman. I think even last year when you looked at that Chiefs matchup, he was having success and just wasn't getting many passes. And it's been one of my favorite things this offseason is to see all the cut-ups from Ravens fans showing how good he was and just not getting some of the opportunities later in the year. And like now, that said, the coaching staff was also taking away some of his snaps to give it to veterans as the year went on. So maybe something behind the scenes didn't look as good as we as fans always saw. But I can 100%. They let Odell Beckham walk for not a whole lot, right? Like they didn't really try to bring him back. I know he already got enough money from it. They didn't try to bring him back. The only real competition they bring in is Nelson Aguilar. They clearly have some faith that they can make it work with Bateman. So yeah, I am interested to see if he has a big kind of breakout year that he hasn't really been able to have because of the injuries. But I do think the scary part is if they can get Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers on the field at the same time to go along with Mark Andrews, to go along, with Isaiah Likely, that's where it gets a little scary if you're the Chiefs. You're trying to figure out how you match up with all those different pieces, all those different parts. You cover all the ground that you need to on the field. It gets difficult. Typically, the Chiefs have been pretty good against 12 personnel. Like under Spags, they were, I think, 4th in the NFL last year in EPA per play against 12 personnel. They saw it a decent amount because teams do like to go a little heavier on them. So they've handled it well, and I think that does help. They did Chiefs lose Willie Gay, so without that extra athleticism, we'll see what that impact is. But they have, Jaden Hicks, big safety coming in as a rookie. You got Justin Reed, again, a big safety. Brian Cook, good tackler. Chamari Connor plays with physicality. Like they usually can handle the 12 personnel pretty good. Where they've struggled in the past is against 21. And you want to come out there and bring in Patrick Ricard. The Ravens didn't do it a lot in that playoff game, but we've seen it against the Raiders over the years. You get a fullback that's really leading through the hole, getting up on these Chiefs linebackers. They've had success. So I'm almost just as worried about the Ravens getting Derrick Henry behind a fullback and then just running straight downhill, because that is something the Chiefs have essentially struggled with every single year, even since Steve Spagnuolo's been here.
We're thinking a little under center action there, Matthew. A little under center there for Lamar. A little pistol. What are we doing?
You're probably going pistol. That's what they've really done when they've done it, and they found a way to make it work. And like, really, Ricard doesn't necessarily line up as a fullback. They kind of sniffer him or H-back him and pull him across. Like, I assume it'll be pistol if they do it. That's another thing we got to watch too. Like, how does Derrick Henry like running from like a read option setup, from like a strong, longer mesh point? How does he like that? I don't know if we've seen a ton of that. So how do all the parts got to work together for them? But I just do think that's a personnel grouping along with the 12 personnel that worries me a little bit, because the Chiefs don't usually do well against good fullbacks. Like that has been something that has hurt them in the past quite a bit.
All right, I want to do a vibe check on the Chief fence here with both of you guys, because like there's not a ton of new. There's really not a ton of additions to this defense. It's a lot of the players that were here last year. They really didn't go out and make any big additions to this group. It's, Jaden Hicks, Christian Roland Wallace, I believe, are the only two players on the Chiefs defensive side of the ball that are new. Marlon Tuipulotu, I guess, like in Cam Thomas. But as far as like draft picks, like they didn't go out and make free agent additions on the defensive side of the ball. It's kind of what this group was last year, minus L'Jarius Sneed. And this was an elite team last year. We talked about the Ravens, really playing from the back end up. And that's kind of what the Chiefs did. Yes, they have an elite interior defensive lineman, but the rest of that defensive line is fine. What's the vibe with this defense? How do you feel with basically running it back minus L'Jarius Sneed heading into this game? Is it a lot of curiosity? Is it a lot of confidence? Hamilton, how do you feel?
I do feel confident. I mean, I think Spags is one of the brightest defensive minds we've ever seen in this game. I think he's proven that. He's proven that throughout his career, but especially these last couple of years is what he's been able to do with this group. The Sneed loss absolutely hurts, but I think the fact that Brett Veach kind of didn't panic or didn't overreact, didn't try to grab at a bunch of defensive play, I think that tells you a lot, right? Like I think it tells you the confidence that he has in this group. And I think over the years we've seen them, we talked about it last time, just with some of the guys, between Josh Williams, Jalen Watson, some of the guys that they've accumulated over the years in the mid to late rounds. I think, we've seen them step up at big points. We haven't seen it over, the extended stretches of time that we're going to have to see it this year. But we have seen the flashes of it. So, I'm a believer in this group. As long as Spags is calling the plays, as long as Chris Jones is out there, there's still so much talent on this defense. And again, a tremendous defensive mind calling the shots.
Yeah, I think that's where I've gotten to the point now is you look at this Chiefs defense and there's all the same guys are back minus L'Jarius Sneed. And then you look at all the talent. They have playmakers on all three levels. Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. You have Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil. You have, Justin Reed, Trent McDuffie. Like you have guys that can make plays on all three levels. There's a certain floor to this defense. And that's like average. At the absolute worst, this defense just based on talent is probably pretty much average. Then you sprinkle in the fact that they have the best, second best, if we're splitting hairs, defensive play caller, especially for big matchups, and Steve Spagnuolo. And it's hard to be overly worried that this defense is going to be so bad that it's going to cost them multiple games, that they are going to get run out of the building. They are going to get run off the field, make the offense score 50 to win these big games. Now, does that mean in specific matchups that the lack of L'Jarius Sneed and the overall, like the cornerback room as a whole thinning out isn't going to be an issue? No, there's certainly going to be games where that might pop up and it'll add a little bit more onto these other guys' plate or Spags to go out there and fix it. But just in general, I think there's a little bit of a safer floor to this defense than there has been in the years past. Like that is something that they have done since Spags has got here, is really built up a defense to have a bottom level that is going to be respectable, and they're going to play a certain way. And then they're going to use him to elevate it from there. And then obviously Chris Jones and McDuffie, the other stars. So I feel good enough about it. I feel good overall. I do have some concern, though, that teams that are willing to really air it out might find success because you're going to get to pick matchups a little bit more. It's not just your wide receiver 2-3 versus Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson. It might be your wide receiver 1 and 3 versus Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. Like that part gets me a little nervous. I don't know if the Ravens have the horses, though, that give me a ton of scare in that regard. That might be something we talk about more next week.
No, I think that's interesting, right? And this defense, you're right, I think has had a high floor consistently in the Steve Spagnuolo era. And like that's always been something, is despite talent, maybe some talent deficiencies at some positions and big question marks at positions like cornerback when Bashad Breeland and Charvarius Ward were your two starting quarterbacks, right? That this team won. Oh, by the way, they won a Super Bowl with that pairing. But they played well down the stretch. They got better as the season went on, and there's been some growing pains and some struggles with some defenses in the past. I have a hard time believing that this team will be able to truly replicate what they did last year, where honestly they kind of won this team some football games as the Chiefs offense was kind of slogging through the season and trying to figure some things out. But I do think a lot of the pressure will be off in the sense that I think the Chiefs are in a better position to put more offensive production up and play from ahead a little bit more and kind of be the aggressor in some of those some of those situations. So I think it all balances out. I definitely think there could be some frustrations with the corners, and I think that's where I'm just in a wait and see mode. Like, what is it? What does this defense truly look like? I don't think they're laying a stinker by any stretch of the word, but what does year 3 of that trio of cornerbacks? And actually, it's a quartet. If you add Najee Johnson, who's finally getting into the mix, he's in that same draft class. They got 4 cornerbacks from that draft class in that room. So what does it look like for those guys? Were they able to take a step, build trust, build confidence, understand the defense a little bit more to allow them to play fast and free and with confidence heading into the season? So it mostly stems around the cornerbacks for me, and I'm just kind of curious to see how they get tested in this game. Let's go to defensive players to watch. Let's go Hamilton. Give me a defensive player to watch for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I mean, I'm going to have my eyes on Nick Bolton because, as we talked about, Derrick Henry is going to be the thing. I think that's going to determine his success is going to determine how this game goes. And Bolton's going to have a huge hand in that. Obviously, we know Chris Jones will get back there and make some plays, but it's ultimately going to be Bolton at that second level to keep Henry from getting that head of steam, getting downhill. This is, we've seen some great things out of Bolton. We've seen some struggles at times, but I think this is one of these games you could really put a stamp on who you are as a player, and I think I'm expecting Bolton to rise to the challenge based on what he's shown so far. I did want to say too, Kent, just based on the point that you just made, it just had me thinking. You're right. Like, this Chiefs defense might not be as good as it was last year, but it might not have to be with how they've been able to fix the offense. And it's just, I think that's the most remarkable part about this stretch of success for the Chiefs is that it hasn't been the same. They haven't done it the same way every year. They've been able to adapt as this, they've gotten salary cap issues. They've had to let guys go. They've had injuries. They're able to figure it out, and they're able to accentuate, to really play into the strengths that they do have. And the fact that last year they were able to ride this defense's back for huge stretches of the season, even in some of those playoff games, while the offense took its hits. Now the offense is on its way back up. It really speaks to, obviously, we know Andy Reid and Spags are great coaches, but it speaks to Veach too, and how he's been able to navigate all the challenges that come with being a successful team and having to pay guys. It really, I don't know that I've ever really seen anything like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this team's had to adjust a lot of different things about themselves from year after year, and sometimes they choose to. And I don't want to say they just do it because they want to. They've obviously been forced into it, but they make changes to their identity on both offense and defense, and they still keep winning from these different ways. So it has been very impressive to watch, and I'm interested to see what this next edition is going to be.
I will say it helps that Patrick Mahomes can play any style of football and be the best in the world at it.
We're allowed to talk about
easier.
Defense, other people, and not just the quarterback all the time. Okay, it's allowed.
Sorry.
All right, my player to watch. Well, actually, I want to say this too. Nick Bolton's a good one because, not only is there the Derrick Henry aspect of it, but the Ravens kind of found you got to play a lot of zone versus the Ravens because of the Lamar Jackson effect. The Ravens went after Nick Bolton a fair amount in that matchup last year in the championship game too. I think they targeted him 8 times. He was the nearest defender, gave up 6 completions, but did have a big pass breakup in there. So he's going to be tested in terms of his coverage and how he handles Derrick Henry. I'm going to go with Trent McDuffie is my guy to watch. Last year, L'Jarius Sneed kind of took on the challenge of shadowing opposing teams' number 1 wide receivers, especially when Spags would let him, which was essentially anytime he asked. So with Zay Flowers last year, those two were matched up quite a bit, roughly half the time when Zay Flowers was aligned out wide. The other half the time he was in the slot. For the most part, he did good. I think we all, he gave up a big catch. Then there was the blown coverage. So he did give up 2 catches for some pretty big yards. But overall, I think he did a pretty good job when those two matched up. Is that now Trent McDuffie? Is he now I don't think he's going to follow number 1 wide receivers, but is he going to play outside and inside? Is he going back to being primarily a slot defender? Just where are they going to use him? How are they going to get him involved? I love Trent McDuffie as the run defender, as the blitzer. How great do I feel about inserting the relatively small corner to be a force defender on Derrick Henry? Like, I feel okay with it, I think, but the size might eventually show up. Would I rather just have him go track down Zay Flowers and play just play coverage on him the whole time? So I'm just intrigued how they use Trent McDuffie, how those matchups go when he does draw Zay Flowers, whether it's in the slot or out on the boundary, because I do think that's the number 1 guy you need to stop in the receiving room. It would make sense to me that McDuffie, with the inside and outside ability, maybe he just follows Flowers everywhere, right? Maybe that's actually something you can do now. Snead didn't go into the slot as much, so you kind of had to limit him to the boundary. Maybe they let him track somebody all over the field. I'm not sure yet. So I just want to see his usage and then just what kind of impact he can have, especially in the run game if they put him in the slot.
I'm going to go with Justin Reed. A guy that we haven't got to see at all during the preseason, during training camp. This is a guy that's been missing a lot of time. But Steve Spagnuolo and Justin Reed, I think, really were hitting their stride as a pairing last year late in the playoffs. And I thought Justin Reed started playing some really good football, and Steve Spagnuolo started weaponizing him in a variety of different ways. I think you saw him more confident flying around the field, blitzing, playing in the box, playing deep, in coverage. Like everything just looked a lot more comfortable for him as the season went on, and especially in the playoffs. And the last time that these two teams matched up, Justin Reed had a sack, TFL, quarterback hit. Like he was making some plays behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage, doing a lot of different things. And so obviously he's missed some time here. And we don't know, what the game fitness level is. He's going to be able to play a full amount of snaps like he normally is. I mean, he's 100% snap type player typically. Does, how much does he actually get on the field? But also, does he hit the ground running the same way that he was, late in the season last year? Because he really was playing his best football in Kansas City as the season was wearing down. So there's so much unknown with Justin Reed and how he's going to look heading into what is a contract season for a Justin Reed. That's always a nice thing. Hey, contract season for Nick Bolton too, by the way. So this is contract years. Are the great Therese Paylor used to say the contract year is undefeated. Let's get into game predictions. Boy, I can't believe we're back to doing this, but I'm so excited. It's been a while since we've got to predict.
So
a real
glad you're not
football
making
game.
me predict a preseason game now too.
Yeah. Well, Hamilton, you have the honors, sir.
All right, I'm taking the Chiefs in this one. I think I think we're going to see some fireworks. I think I'm going 31-28 Chiefs, and I think I'm going to add a bonus prediction for you. I think the Chiefs win. I think we see Justin Reed have a big game, and I think we see Justin Reed on Up and Adams Friday morning after the win.
Let's go.
That's my call.
Look at the synergy here. Let's go. I love it.
I like that. That's a good one.
Maddie, what you got?
Oh, it's me? I thought you were up. Okay. All right, so I want to say this first. We have a couple Ravens fans that have come and hung out in the chat. We appreciate you guys. I think I saw a Will in there and some others in there coming out throughout the whole thing. We appreciate you guys. Thank you. I was reading your comments and I agree with some of your stuff. We didn't get it all up there because we're trying to get through this game preview, get all of our first game takes off the chest that we all have loaded up in our minds, bouncing around for months now. But we do see you guys there. We appreciate it, and I am sorry that you guys will start the year 0-1 as the Chiefs are taking this game. They are taking it 27-23. I think it will be a close game, but I don't think it's going to be quite a full-on nail-biter like that score might think. I think we will see the Chiefs come out. The Chiefs have more continuity returning. They just have the same coaching staff. They're missing very few pieces. And the only thing that's really different is, we talked about L'Jarius Sneed, but offensively, the Chiefs are adding new guys. They're adding players. They're adding elements. And that's going to it's going to put the onus on the Ravens to adjust to what the Chiefs are doing differently. And the Ravens are already having to adjust on both sides of the ball for their own departures, for their own changeover. So it feels like they have a little bit more that they have to figure out to find their stride in this game for week one. The Chiefs are really just going to be sprinkling in new stuff on top of having the more or less the same team, all the same pieces in there. So I feel pretty good about the Chiefs starting hot this year. I think they are going to come out early in this game and try to put their stamp on it like they did in the playoff game. I just don't know if it'll stall out quite as hard, but it will be a good game. I am sure the two teams will probably see each other again later on.
Yeah, there's a pretty good chance that these teams will get to play each other at some point here. This last season was weird for a lot of reasons. Days before the first game of the year, Travis Kelce gets injured, and that kind of throws everything in, throws a wrench in the Chiefs' ability to game plan for the Detroit Lions. This is a team that is usually one of the most prepared heading into week one. And actually, honestly, I think the Ravens are kind of like that too. Both of these teams are very good about hitting the ground running early in the season and get some big wins early in the year. But the Chiefs kind of, they had their struggles. They had their issues. Oh, and by the way, they still almost won the football game against the Detroit Lions, and Kadarius Toney kind of blew that. So I think this team.
Let the man get a job first before you bury him. Come on.
Yeah, he's had two. I don't know. I think the the pain of last year, the frustrations of last year are something that the Chiefs have no desire to go back to, and have no, like, the leadership has no desire to go back to. So when you're talking about how locked in a team is going to be, how focused the team, this is the right kind of leadership that's going to refuse to let what happened in the frustrations of last year kind of dictate how the regular season goes moving forward. I think this team wants to start hot. I think this team is going to start hot. I think they're going to set the tone with explosive plays. I think they're going to, put some points on the board. They might, maybe throttle down a little bit because they're in a little bit more control. I think there's a lot in flux with the Ravens, like we've kind of talked about in this game, or in this show. I think the Chiefs managed this game to a 28-21 win. I think they put 21 points up in the first half. I think it's a hot start. I think it's a explosive touchdown for Xavier Worthy involved there. And then I think, it's 21-7 heading into the fourth quarter, and both teams scored, or the Ravens might put a couple points on the board there late, but I think the Chiefs close this thing out 28-21. That is going to do it.
Before
okay. Okay.
You don't have to explain. You don't have to explain yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do Hammy first, then we're going to do you second, Kent. If the Chiefs lose this game, let's say comfortably, they don't get blown out, but it's not like it's not coming down to a last second field. The Chiefs lose this game, not a panic level, but a worry level that this, Ravens team that's got all this stuff to figure out in the very first game of the year comes in and beats the Chiefs in the home opener. What would be your worry level for the Chiefs if they lose that game in that fashion?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say like a 4 or 5. I'm not overreacting to it. Obviously, like, it's a super talented team. There's a lot in flux, like we're saying, but just because we don't know the answers doesn't mean that the answers aren't going to be positive for Baltimore. So we just don't know. So and that also that could work in their favor too, the unknown factor. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with a loss here. Again, if it's a close loss, like you're saying, I wouldn't be concerned too much.
Aiden O'Connell won a game in Arrowhead.
Yeah,
without completing a pass for 3 quarters, and we said this team is lifeless. This team doesn't have it. I think this season's kind of cooked, and then they went and turned it around and won a Super Bowl. So I'm not going to be overly concerned. I don't think there's anything that can make me overly concerned. I believe in the talent on this team way too much for them to not figure things out as the season goes along. If it's a little bit lifeless, that'll be, be worth paying attention to. But again, it looked lifeless on Christmas Day last year. So,
I'd go like a 2. I'm not, I agree with you guys in the explanation. I don't need to dive into it. Just like a 2. It wouldn't concern me at all. Like, maybe the Ravens come out and look great. All these things that we're talking about don't matter. They get their get back against the Chiefs in the regular season after the playoffs. The Chiefs, they're going to spend time to figuring it out. We'll revisit again in January, so there would be no concern if it happens. The Ravens are a good team. I just wanted to make sure, as we all 3 picked the Chiefs to win, that we were like, hey, it's not like the Chiefs, we expect them to win or the season's over or anything like that.
Absolutely not. But this show is over. That's going to do it for the KC Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll talk to you after a Chiefs victory on Thursday night on the KCSN post game. Catch you later.
Is there no show if they don't win?